with in all the full picture of health-related issues. It is also important in the management of healthcare system to see what are the different causes that need to be seen in the budget with different size of that budget and how to allocate that in the best for the needs of the population. The growing knowledge in the special areas of public health shows that now we have more evidence where to put resources, how to use it more effectively. But to provide with this knowledge, we need to have valuable indicators. Oops, I did something wrong. And GBD is one of the most interesting and promising indicators and approaches that allow us to have evidence-based indicator for health policy. I will not, you all already saw a couple of times definition. I will not spend time on translation. These are two people, founders of this method, it's Chris Murray and Professor Alan Lopez. They were devoted to the idea to know what are the causes that is making people die, what are the real causes, how to estimate and evaluate world's loss of health. And they developed a method, global burden of disease, which are now in use in a number of organizations. And while our colleagues, being very modest and very carefully separated themselves from WHO, but from the very beginning, United Nations umbrella was covering the development and use of this methodology, because World Bank and WHO from the very beginning become to be recipient of this methodology, and they started to evaluate countries and potential for improvement of health with these definitions, with this methodology. And we see that biggest biomedical funds that are sponsoring research are also using these methods. Biggest banks and biggest donors and ministries of health of biggest countries are also interested in this method. In WHO, of course, it's difficult to define what will be the future of this method with relation to WHO, but for sure this method is now the world's method. WHO have a lot to do with development of this ideology and methodology. And at some extent, it was the organization where this method was developed, and it was quite a whole organization. And now it's developing in a separate institution, but it is very important to have for the world the method that is independent and to evaluate WHO countries which are great. Is where the interest of this method is quite profound. Now, like about 50 countries are now themselves to the research project, which will be supported by the platform of European WHO in the Euro burden of disease. We try to see approaches that are used in the evaluate and try to collaborate with that. It's not like they are opposing themselves, they are trying to work, maybe not in such a way as we are doing in a free discussion during our seminars. They will try to use more scientific approach to develop special attitude, formal scientific attitude towards methods and results of burden of disease, and especially for Europe. And what is very promising, GBD is including almost all data about related to health in the world. This is very important to have such an organization where people with advanced education can evaluate this data and make it available to the rest of the world. It is surveys, it is census, data, name it, and they have what their topics are so many that you may ask someone, they will don't know the full extent of the knowledge that they are keeping, but they are doing it, and we need to help them with that. So, okay, I will not stop on that. This is complexity of the method. And this slide, I'm very grateful to Professor Nagavi, who has helped me with this presentation, showing that actually not many countries now prepared to study their own health data with such a capacity, not only for evaluation quality of the data and gathering of the data, but actually with the process of analysis of the data, because it's humongous numbers. You need to have high quality computer scientists around. And of course, our goal is to clean our data, because this method will be a method of international comparison. And if we will have data which are not compatible, which we will later be complaining about the quality of the data, of course, it is not politically correct. And of course, when we are talking about use of this method for policy reasons, we can see that visualization methods show us where are the most problems for the healthcare system in Russia currently. And here we see hypertension for male and female, body mass index data, and the diet and lipids and smoking. And we see that when we are studying Russia with both sexes, it's less informative. And maybe one of the messages that we would like to share with you, the less you will combine data for male and female while you're looking at Russia, the more resultative all of us will get. Because there is no country with such a difference in life expectancy and many other things like Russia. And of course, we are talking about a lot of risk factors where we do think our data must be improved. And there is no other methodology which allow country to picture itself, to look at the mirror of the visualization tools and see where are the key for improvements. And starting with data, starting with representation, and to the effectiveness of healthcare system, which we unfortunately did not touch during this seminar. But there is so much to learn from IHME about the effectiveness of the healthcare system and what are the possible ways to use international knowledge. And this slide shows some of the countries that are moved towards subnational studies. Now we see the China's subnational divisions. And it's just to show that we are not only flower in the field. And probably the best example, for me at least, maybe I don't know all of them, but in Great Britain, while they studied the results of global burden of disease for their country, and when they positioned themselves in the international level, they decided to take it in serious consideration. And they did serious policy papers, which are unusually for us maybe, but for them it was a serious push for improvement. And you see that in October 2014 they did national papers, and actually now they are working on subnational level and improving health, populational health, through risk factors improvement and through all other measures. And if we are speaking about wins that achieved through the methodology of global burden of disease, but of course we must say that attention that now government of China is paying to environmental issues this issue is partially due to the global burden of disease. And Brazil, from what I heard, and I heard wonderful stories, become a very active participant and collaborator of GBD, and they trained enormous number of people, and a lot of universities are now teaching this approach while teaching public health and other populational issues. And now they are progressing because it is very important to set up standards of population health and have a measurement to see the achievement. And of course, when we are looking in our regions, we see the big diversity. And we need a measure that will allow people who are decision makers to evaluate what are the ways how to jungle what to do with our budget and where to allocate it and what was the reason and justification for this allocation. And this is, of course, it's important to do regional analysis, but also when we see a single disease, very important disease like diabetes, we can see very vividly who are the winners and who are the losers of our state public health system work, and where are the ways to improve it. And of course, one of the reasons for road injury success in Russia is attention of the government, but it's also important to evaluate not only the state policy and federal achievements, but to see inside the regions and work specifically with the losers. And why I am supporting this overall, among other reasons, the GBD, among other reasons, is the reason that this approach allows us to evaluate all causes of death and disease and risk factors. There is no outsiders that will be left from analysis. There will be distribution inside, but everything will be taken in consideration. It might be questionable how it's taken, but it will be. And when we see how to use for policy making different features of the system, we must see that it is great potential for see inside the system and use it's different. The complication of use of the system, partially for me, for instance, I went through the formal study in Greece, but I still very much afraid to lose different button. And the result that I will achieve, I wouldn't be trusting. So probably this has something to do also with education. Maybe I'm not that bright, but probably it's also with education or face-to-face possibility of the system. So probably we'll together need to work more on that. Maybe I'm not the only one who is shy with that. We've seen, for instance, more population have been studied, know a lot about Moscow city and how this approach help us to see in inclusive way. We can see it as a three-dimensional picture of the person, like the Moscowite population, and this is very important. And of course, very important is a comparison between countries, and these are some regional comparisons, and when we see comparisons between some countries, neighboring countries, we see that Russia is doing something right, because the indicators of losses, for instance, with risk factors is going down. And unfortunately, Ukrainians' numbers are showing that they are going down from the much higher level. I'm so sorry. Okay. In all these graphs that will be available to you on the internet, you can see some comparisons of Russian Federation with other countries, okay? And what... Do you hear me well? Yes. Good. Oops. I want to show you this slide when the speaker is out. I like to show you Finland. You see the smallest bar. Finland is a very good example for us how to improve health. Because you know that when your question was Karelia and ischemic heart disease, it was done in the 70s when Karelian regions on Finland side and in Russian side both experienced high levels of these indicators. But Finnish side started to do very aggressive prevention and Russians did not follow. So this, I think for you it might be very interesting, and maybe Daria will tell you more about Finnish-Ugor national specifics, not only in cardiovascular but also in suicidal behavior, which are much higher than others. So, to finish with my presentation, I would like to finalize that this approach is very useful and very important for management. And again, if Russia wants to have its place in the world, the data should be cleaner, that there is no place for argument. Why do we look like we are not like you are picturing us? We are different. So let's work together to improve at first our data. And I hope to continue our work. Thank you very much. Спасибо большое. Вопросы какие есть к коллегам или ко мне? Пожалуйста.
You present very nice.
У кого-то телефон рядом с...
You presented very nice example how the national governments use the results of the model in Chinese and Brazil. And what about our government, our Ministry of Health? How did they use this model?
Our Ministry of Health was very attentive, and they sent you also a letter of invitation for this meeting. I mean, not you like you, but for your organization. We are very grateful to the Ministry for the support of this. So attention is growing, and also the publications that are made in Lancet and many other very important places, usually they are bringing attention of our government. And Ministry of Health is being questioned why Russia is in such position in inter-country comparison. And usually this comparison is in DALI. All life expectancy, a new set of GPD is being made. And after that, ministry usually is questioning people who are involved in this work to explain how come Russia is in such and such position. So there is growing interest on one side. There is the interest that we must take as a positive step and together develop in something more effective.
I ask it because now the program health program plan discussed in our academy, and one of the features of this plan that that very simplify target characteristic was used for evaluate the effect of maybe you know that they use simply dose rate, mortality, and it's this approach is very simplified. How can we, how to say, to put our part in?
Well, if you know people with whom we can talk about it, we will be happy to. Just please let us know, okay?
Think about 2-3 suggestions. Russia has a unique situation due to the facing to the world and due to the reaction of the world to the Russia, and also situation that we have in the Russia. Okay, there was many bad crises, and you pass a very hard situation from 1980 until 2027, and okay, all is acceptable. And now we are in this situation that very easy. Let me talk very easy. People out of the Russia do not look to the Russia in other way, and Russia look to the other part of the world in other way. And also in the Russia, people are in the different position. Some are agree, some are not agree. There is a very specific situation. What we have to do for the improving of health based on the result of GBD or based on any other result. My suggestion is that first you should rely to the media. Maybe this is a way that can, for example, did you make an interview or in the TV or in the radio or other thing that, okay, somebody in the world talk about Russia, somebody in the world talked about situation of the health in Russia, and this is the result. Very easy. Very easy. For example, somebody shows that our life expectancy is here, but our alcohol is here. Do you know, I am thinking now in Russia the most important, powerful part of all of the life is media. But we didn't look and we didn't talk with media. I am thinking, Elena, you are the best person that can make many interviews and explain what is the GBD. What GBD talked about Russia, and then explain this. Media is important. Another thing that is important and we lost is university. Usually we do not have connect with the university, different university in Russia. Maybe if there is any meeting, any good congress, conference in Russia that talk about the health situation and many other professors come to this meeting, you should inform us. Okay, we will come. Or you should go and explain what is okay, we have a conference in cancer in Russia. Okay, somebody from GBD goes and talk about, okay, this is our estimation. Then they think that, oh, there is some other person talk about Russia. University also is very important. We have to rely to the university. Honestly, we have a very small number of the collaborators, and this is very small. And do you know, all of the burden of the pushing this job in IHME is in the shoulder of Elena, 2-3 other person, and us. And this is not fair. Really, this is not fair. How we can bring other people to this area? Did you look to the result of GBD by subnational? I am sure, except of handful of the people in Russia, nobody didn't look to that. How we have to bring more people as a collaborator. And when we bring people here, we have to ask them involvement. They have to involve. Except of the 2-3% that I know by name, we didn't receive any comment from Russia about this data. And we cannot survive support in IHME, because it has to show somewhere that in Brazil they kill us. Tons of emails, tons of good things, tons of bad things. Sometimes I have to go and say, I am sorry, it was my mistake. Really. Or in other countries, there are a lot of discussion. But in Russia, understandable, there is a very bad situation. There was a very bad crisis in this country. But anyway, sometimes we have to introduce this process. And I think media is one thing that be very helpful. Somebody has to sacrifice himself, herself, and go to the media. I know for us it's very hard. We are not a group that love to be in the media. I understand. We hate camera. We have allergy to the camera. But anyway, we have to go. We have to go and explain. We have to go to the different seminar in the university, different university, and talk about that. Bring people to help. We cannot survive. That was my point. Sorry.
У нас остался вопрос. We have left question of this graph. Remember why ischemic heart disease is so low? But maybe next time. Okay. Do you have more questions? Any points to discuss at the moment, please?
Yes, I guess indeed for ischemic heart disease we will discuss tomorrow. It seems to have different relationship with alcohol consumption. Also, alcohol consumption doesn't seem to be the proper estimate for Russia. But anyway, so my question was with suicide. According to the focus, it is supposed to take the second place, but it has been declining since 2000. 00, the decline was nearly 3 times in suicide. It used to be 56,000 of suicides, now it's 20,000 of suicides. And I guess we see no evidence of change in this trend, so I'm not sure we're going to have such high impact.
Suicide in Russia decreased both in the number and in the age pattern. Suicide in 98, if you look, one time I looked 2-3 years ago, I can't remember exactly. In 1980 until 2000, mostly suicide happened in old age. People that there was a political crisis, people that lost everything, old people. There are a big crisis in suicide in old age. After 2000, pattern change, slowly decrease, and age pattern is more young. If you look to this process, you can see. But anyway, in young ages, suicide is the top one causes of deaths.
In the forecasting results that I showed, the slide that you're referring to was an arrow diagram. The suicide estimates are actually decreasing in the percent change. It's just that the ranking is going up because other causes are decreasing. It's the difference between the rank and the percentage change.
Everything will be so great that only this probably will be that high.
Sorry?
There will be so much improvement.
Exactly. So yeah, so that it's still decreasing overall, quite significantly actually.
But
yeah.
Anyway, suicide, there is big discussion between suicide in India and China. Suicide in Russia has another discussion. Next week we have a paper in BMJ about suicide. We will publish. But as a suggestion, no way, Daria, based on the GBT, not subnational, based on the GBT, publish a paper about suicide. No, this data, this result belong to you. Why you do not want to publish a paper?
Well,
Professor, is it possible that you and me work together and publish a paper about cancer in Russia based on the GBT result? We are very happy to help. Do you know, there is a scaring, there is a fear that people do not want to touch GBT. Swear to God, this is not something bad. This is good. This is your data, your result. Please write a paper in Russian language, in English language, in any language that you want. We will support, we will provide table, graph, anything that you want.
I must say that there is another dangerous that, okay, you are very smart people. You do a huge, very, very complicated and smart results. Okay, no need to to run your own epidemiological study, to collect more precise statistics, to establish new registry, because it's easy. I just go to the computer, take your results, and you say me all you know about us.
I am not agree with you 100%. Sorry, I like you, but let me say, no, you are not right. GBD, first step in the GBD shows what is the weak point in the data, where we have to fix the data. For example, in the causes of deaths, first point that we are saying that, okay, data in causes of this in Rostat is aggregated. And this is a problem because it doesn't have a small uncertainty. Or in cancer registry, this is example. We have this problem, this problem, this problem. We are not, first step in the GBD is showing what is the priority in the research.
Yeah. Yes.
Then go to the priority in the public health.
In many of the other countries that we're supporting, the primary use of the GBD is to illustrate priorities for new data collection and for health information system strengthening. It's actually one of, I think, the strongest uses of GBD. It gives you estimates today where we have incomplete information for health outcomes, even in the most wealthy countries in the world with highest development status. None of them have data on all outcomes, none. We have collaborators in Norway, they've been working with us for years.
Yes.
They haven't had a risk factors survey in 15 years.
And now they know.
And they have linkage data for many outcomes. One of the best data systems in the world, no risk factor information. So with the GBD, in my personal view, the GBD can be used is it can be used to give us some sense, comprehensive sense of what's happening while we are living in our present world where we have imperfect data. And then it can tell us where we can improve our health information systems. It's actually why Elena had showed a slide of some of the organizations using GBD estimates. It's why the National Institutes of Health in my country have been using GBD. It's why the Wellcome Trust in the UK is using GBD, because they're trying to use it to determine what should the priority for funding future research be. So I think that's partly our responsibility to explain and use these results to advocate for new health information system work and new surveys. One of the other projects that we're working on over the next year is to make a visualization tool that shows the data gaps and the data weaknesses. So right now we have maps of just the results, but I want the map of, and this is something I'm advocating heavily for because I think it's extremely important for countries, is the map that shows where you don't have data for. And Jeff had shown some of these in his presentations, and you can see, here's where the conditions that we don't have good data for. I would like that to be interactive, just like the other ones we showed today. That could be quite useful. Yeah, it's not our viewpoint that this should replace strong data systems. It's more of a stopgap measure, an interim solution. No.
Do you know, sorry, I don't know that it is bad or good that I want to say, but do you know Oblomov? Okay. I am thinking there is a chronic Oblomovism in the public health area in Russia. Chronic Oblomovism. This is my diagnosis, sorry. I am right? Okay.
You're going to have to explain that to me.
I will explain it for you. This was some Russian historical discussion. But Oblomov was a very good person.
It's very good. Because you see, this the person whom was this is a hero of the novel. And actually, if you will judge him by all what he did in life, he is horrible, but everybody loves him. And probably this is this is how we should explain our system. But it's much better, and I would like also to say another thing. When you working with WHO, please remember that all of us are part of this organization. And if you differ yourself very much, it creates problems for us. So in a way, you are also part of it, because the approach that was developed there is still need to be used in this organization too. So for many reasons, consider thinking what is your relation with this organization and how much you separate yourself from it. It's for me it's very important, because from my evaluation, you are not that far. You are separating on the current political issues, but in public health approach, you have public health approach, and methodology is always a question. So maybe this might be one of the way to explain that as a public health people you are with, and there are some issues of methodology which need to be discussed in civilized society, maybe something like that, I don't know, but it will be really helpful. More questions? Or opinions, or suggestions, or you would like to invite us next time to your institution?
Maybe it will be interesting for everybody to know that it's in a plan to publish guideline in Russian. Could you say something about it?
We are part of the initiative of the WHO on European burden of disease. And this organization, in participation with IHME, is now preparing a paper which is named guidelines, but it's not really guidelines by nature, I think. But you will see it. It's a discussion about the method, the process, and the possible outcomes. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes. I am working on writing this. It's a manual on, you're referring to the manual on methods? Yes. We're writing a manual for countries on how to approach burden of disease frameworks, how to utilize methods, possibilities for using them for management or for other decision making. IHME is also a member of the European Burden of Disease Network. And we can't say exactly when the manual will be published, because it has several more steps of review in WHO system, but once it is published, I think it will be a useful resource to countries that synthesizes the methodology, philosophy of the GBD approach, all in one place, that is useful specifically for a country perspective. So as soon as that is approved by WHO, because they have this this mandate to prepare guidelines, we will inform everyone, and it will go on everyone's websites and be available to you. And also it has useful case studies included from some of the other countries that Alina had shown in her presentation, including Public Health England, which we agree is very good gold standard case study. So it has a long case study about what was done in Public Health England.
Спасибо большое. Thank you very much. Yes?
I have one. Sorry. One. Please, is it possible somebody... I am very happy to help anybody that wants to write paper about finding in GBD in Russian language for Russia. This is very important. If you publish 4, 5, 6 papers in scientific journal in Russia, in Russian language, you will have a very good reaction from university. And many persons say, oh, what is the GBT? In Russian language.
If somebody wants to publish in Russia, it's better to republish in Demoscope, because Russian scientific journals are not very open unfortunately.
Well, Demoscope is have special view on GBD. We might. We will discuss it later.
Online.
We have idea that on the platform of our institution we will develop group of people who are interested in GBD studies, and please state your interest by sending me email with your credentials, address, and how you would like to participate. Thank you. And thank you for coming, and I'm very grateful to our colleagues who are, despite of the short notice from the ministry in the very cold weather of Russia, they came here and gave us wonderful presentations, and let's continue our work. Сертификаты на столе. Можете взять. Спасибо, до свидания.
Let's thank Elena for organizing this event. So maybe.
Thank you.
And if somebody is not afraid of English, we are welcoming everybody tomorrow at 10 for the satellite risk factor seminar, 10 to 2 o'clock.
На третьем этаже.
Yeah.